Welcome to the LRNteach.com podcast, helping you consider Christian education for the poor and marginalized from a theonomic perspective. LRNteach.com advises you to cease from man and to think God's thoughts after him. Find us at LRNteach.com on YouTube and in the iTunes Store. Contact me at facebook.com/Christian.education. Aaron, nice to talk to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do in life?
I am a reverend, a Christian school teacher and manager with Grace Community School here in Florida. I'm in Fort Myers, Florida, with my wife and family. I've been working with Grace Community School actually since I was a teenager. My wife and I, we now supervise two successful Christian schools here. One in Fort Myers, one in North Fort Myers. I got married at age 19. My wife is Amy. I met her at this ministry. We were both working in it. I was in the apprenticeship program at the time. I'm now 31, and we have 5 children now, ages 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. My 5 kids, they're with us each day. We homeschool them here at the school. They help us run the ministry. So they get to stay with us here each day. They do their schoolwork, but they do a lot more than that. It's not just academic materials they're learning. They're learning how to run a business. They're learning a trade. They're learning how to do all the jobs that it requires to operate a Christian school. And in the long run, that's, of course, a lot more important than just book learning, just academics. My wife and I, each day, we have hundreds of students, much like Reverend Jeremy Walker mentioned. The building I'm in most of the time, we have over 200 students daily. I teach Bible to them. Of course, there's a whole lot of other stuff that we do as well. It keeps us busy. Grace Community School as a whole, we actually have 10 school buildings in 8 locations. So there's a lot of work to be done. Everybody pitches in. I mean, if you count the students, the staff, parents, grandparents, you're talking thousands of people across the 8 locations. So there's a whole lot of work. Of course, there's maintenance, there's administration. We have a large social media presence. I do quite a bit of work with that. Outreach to our parents. Of course, there's a lot of paperwork, there's accounting. And everybody here, they found their niche, what we're good at and how we can help out the schools. And the interesting thing about all these students I mentioned, over 200 just at my location alone, these are all paying students. They come here, their parents pay for them to attend. We take care of them. We teach them reading. We teach them Bible. We teach them music. We have piano lessons and music lessons here, all the other subjects. And it's really a tremendous opportunity here. Growing up, I didn't think that I would be involved in anything like this. My dad is a pastor. My grandfather was. Uncles who are pastors. I have a lot of relatives who are involved in missionary work. I have an uncle and his family. They're actually in Cambodia doing missionary work. So it shouldn't have been surprising to me that I ended up in the ministry, but I never really thought about that I would end up here growing up. There's a lot of precedence, of course, but for me, I didn't think I would be where I am today, certainly not with such a unique ministry. The interesting thing, I have hundreds of students each day. They're here to listen to me. I can teach the Bible faithfully to them. I don't have to dilute it. I don't have to be careful that I'm going to offend someone. They're not going to come in tomorrow. These are kids that they will accept things much more easily than adults. The Bible tells us we're to be as little children when it comes to spiritual matters, and we actually have hundreds of children that listen to me each day. The ministry is one it's independent, especially financially independent. We're not dependent on donations. We are selling childcare services. We don't have to please church members to stay in operation. Very much an independent ministry. In a more regular church and ministry, the pastor usually has to be very careful about preaching in particular. You got to be careful that you don't offend people. It's challenging, but here, I know The kids here, they're going to be back tomorrow. They're going to be back to hear me preach. It gives you a lot more freedom.
Thank you for that intro. And what struck me when I was reading your book, of the many things that struck me, was that the apprenticeship program is not just apprenticing the official apprentices, but it's apprenticing your family as well, and that from early years. I just didn't realize that your family was with you. You are homeschooling, but you're also running a Christian school, so it seems most unique to me and most encouraging. So you said that you're from a family of missionaries, for a family of those called into work, so in various Christian ministries. So how did the Lord call you specifically at a young age into this particular ministry?
Well, brought into the apprenticeship program when I was about 18 years old. And I think it's important for people considering this ministry to see how we got here. I know Dr. McIntyre talks about it quite a bit in his book, of course, How to Become a Millionaire in Christian Education. And Jeremy Walker, in his interviews with you, he mentioned how he had become involved. As I said, me personally, I never envisioned myself doing something like that, even though I grew up as a preacher's kid with a dad who was a pastor, many other people in the ministry, around people in Christian ministry all the time. I think you have to have a calling. It's very important to have a calling. And the story of how I discovered my calling, how I was led to Grace Community School, was through my parents. They were working with Grace Community School as managers in the apprenticeship program. And I wasn't. I didn't even consider Christian ministry. I was a teenager. I grew up in a Christian home. Never had a conversion experience, but I was homeschooled. My parents were led to take me and my brothers out of the public school. I've been was homeschooled since the 3rd grade. I liked it a lot. I don't feel that I was deprived at all being homeschooled. I think the opposite is the case. I think being homeschooled is a wonderful thing. One of the things I talk about quite a bit in my book is the benefits to homeschoolers. Being myself, homeschool alumni, someone who grew up as homeschooled, I think I have some things to say to people, especially about the Grace community system from the perspective of someone who was homeschooled. I was very interested in science growing up, science technology. I wanted to become an engineer. That's where I saw myself growing up. I was on track to go to college, which is probably going to be a traditional secular college in the aerospace field. And then God intervened. It was definitely God's leading. I talk a lot about discovering your calling in the book. I thought I knew what my calling was, but I was wrong. As I said, my parents were working as managers, and I was nearing where I was going to be finished with finishing my high school. And over just a period of few days, I came to have a sense that God did not want me to pursue my own plans. Instead, I should go work for Grace Community School. I was already working part-time after my schoolwork with Grace Community School, but I wasn't planning on staying. And then over just a period of a few days, God changed that for me. I went into the apprenticeship program. I applied with Reverend McIntyre, and he took me on in the apprenticeship program. I started working out as a teacher's aide and learning to teach Bible to the kids. And then after that, I moved on to management. We recommend a 3-year apprenticeship for people wanting to do this ministry. 3 years is about enough time to discover what you're good at, what you're not good at. You need some time also to acquire the credentials. We're definitely something different from a traditional college, but you do need certain credentials. A master's degree in Christian education or early childhood education, definitely important thing if you're going to be in management in this business. But one of the fantastic things about the GCS apprenticeship program is you can get all the credentials that you need, while at the same time, you don't have to stop working. You get your on-the-job experience. At the same time, you don't have to leave. You don't have to stop receiving income. The GCS apprenticeship program actually pays for your college tuition, a distance learning program. Currently, we use Patriot Bible University, which is out in Colorado, and that's where I got my master's degree. Not something you need to go out and into debt to get your credentials. It's a really great system we have here. It's not a college, it's something entirely different. It's much more than a college, I think, could ever be. I met my wife, Amy. She was the manager of our location in Naples Park, Florida here. We got married, and as I said, we now have 5 kids, 3 girls, 2 boys. We're in charge of 2 locations, Fort Myers and North Fort Myers. Most of the time I'm here at the Fort Myers location, but we do oversee the North Fort Myers location. Apprenticeship program, you start out with the basics and you learn everything. Classroom skills, assisting teachers, learning to manage a classroom, and then you move on to multiple classrooms and the management aspects, passing on what you've learned, getting your credentials. Even after the apprenticeship program ends, of course, you never stop learning. You still continue to grow. I know that's definitely true for me. And it's just been wonderful. I don't know where I would have ended up if God hadn't intervened, but he showed me my true calling.
That's very helpful and very interesting. You had an idea in your head that your calling was in the aerospace industry. You were making moves towards that, but God, perhaps not dramatically, but definitely decisively, told you in no uncertain terms that no, this was not the way. And you say over the course of a few days just that he turned you around and put you in a different direction. I must say that it does sound very challenging doing the apprenticeship program. I'm sure it's most rewarding, but I expect that your pace of work hasn't really slowed down since. I suspect that it's ramped up slightly.
You get good at something, your responsibilities typically increase, and the rewards do as well. But especially as my wife and I continue to have children, that of course is another aspect of it. The kids they're definitely assets. They do help out around about it, but of course, more children means more responsibilities.
And that leads me on to my next question. What moved you, an already very busy man, to take the time and effort necessary to write a book on the issue?
Well, we wanted to do an outreach to the Christian community. It seemed natural for us to aim at the homeschool community. I grew up as homeschooled. This is more or less how the children of our apprenticeship and management couples here, they're at the schools, but it's close to a homeschool curriculum for sure. And the interesting thing about homeschoolers, they have it half down already. At least the Christian homeschoolers, they're avoiding the government schools, which is a big topic of my book. They're trying to pass on faithful Christianity to their children. They're trying to raise up their children in nurture and admonition of the Lord. That's definitely the first half. You have to have that. You've got to take care of your family, especially the spiritual health of your family. But then there's the other thing that all Christians are called to, in whatever sphere they're called to, is to build God's kingdom. That's the other half of it. How do you fulfill the Great Commission? How do you build God's kingdom? And we wanted to show how it was possible to do both. You can homeschool, you can stay away from government schools, you can give your children what they need spiritually, but also to advance, to evangelize at the same time. We have a really great thing here in Grace Community School with our apprenticeship program, our system, and it would be selfish for us to keep it to ourselves. It was Reverend McIntyre's idea for the book, actually. He came to me and said, I had this idea, we need to get our system out there to people, especially the homeschool, the Christian school graduates. These people would be ideal candidates to pick up our system and do it themselves. At least the homeschoolers I'm familiar with, they seem to be very independent, they're driven. And these are the kind of people that we're looking for to run this system, to be able to take this, either become an apprentice or start the school somewhere else. And we wanted to get the homeschoolers, Christian school graduates, or young men and women, tell them about this opportunity, especially perhaps to get these people before they go off to traditional college. I mean, you can't go to traditional college and then come back and do this system, of course, and with quite a few people who have. However, giving up years of your life, you're potentially going into debt and all the other pitfalls that go along with that, where you could be instead coming here as an older teenager, learning the system, getting your college degree here while you gain work experience, and then you go directly into your calling. There's no delay like there is with college. It seems like a really ideal system. We thought and prayed about it, and we wanted to get this out to everybody. So he said, would you write it? And I said, sure, I'll write it.
Wow. So, again, just to sum up, you are targeting the Christian homeschoolers here, and you are targeting them with a challenge. The challenge is you have withdrawn from the public schools and you're doing many things which are positive. You are learning from better teachers, your standard of education is great and so on, but what are you doing actively to advance the kingdom? And you are not only poking at them and saying, why are you not doing stuff? You're also offering an opportunity that enables them to continue homeschooling if and when the Lord gives them a family. It allows them to make a living. It allows them to do this whilst getting their college degrees. So you're offering not just, I think, an alternative, but I would say it certainly seems to be one of the best opportunities at so many levels. You are selling people the goose that lays the golden eggs, as it were, in terms of building the kingdom and building a family and just being a responsible adult. And why is this book important? What's the most important thing you think about this book?
To answer that, I think you need to look at why we're doing what we're doing at Grace Community School. There's a lot of reasons, but the main goal, again, is to build God's kingdom. And to do that, you need to start at the bottom up. If you're going to change society, and this is something the enemies of Christianity understand, if you're going to change society, you need to start with the young ones, the young children as possible. That's the bottom line. And if you took nothing away from my book, I think that's what you should take away. Preschool, very young children, this is where the battle is. It would be insanity to intentionally wait until kids are in elementary or high school or even college before attempting to convert and disciple them. Of course, we still need evangelism at all levels, all age levels, all areas of society, but it shouldn't be a main effort. I see a lot of Christians, they're targeting the college kids and they're targeting elementary and high schools and adults, and that's great, but at that point, it's so hard. You need to get these kids when they're young. Those ministries should be an extension of the ministry to the preschoolers, to the young children, not the main effort. I think there's quite a bit of misdirection to much of Christianity today, especially when it comes to evangelism. They're focused on these older age groups at the detriment to the younger ones, not just ignoring them. And in some cases, they're forbidding the little children to come. They won't even allow them. There's a lot of Christian schools that won't even take preschoolers. They start at the elementary level and that's their focus, and they have the upper grade levels. They won't minister to the younger ones at all. There are Christian preschools, but that's another issue, is what should the difference between a Christian preschool and a secular preschool be? And when I was researching my book, I was a little surprised to find out there's a lot of books written about Christian homeschooling, Christian schools, the evils of the public school, very good stuff. But about preschools, is very little that is written on this. I know because when you work in childcare here in the state of Florida, you have to take the government childcare classes. So I'm aware of the humanism that's embedded in the preschool system. And from what I've seen of Christian preschools, they're not much different. They're pretty much the same curriculum, the same philosophy of education. Basically, they put some Bible stories in there, and supposedly this is what makes it a Christian preschool as opposed to a Christian preschool. I've even seen some curriculums for preschoolers that they come in two different kinds. There's one that's secular, and then one has the Bible stories, and that's the Christian preschool curriculum. And nobody seems to see that there should be a fundamental difference between a secular preschool, non-Christian, which is a humanistic preschool, and a Christian preschool. As I said, there's a lot of good Christian schools out there, but most of them don't have the preschool, or it's just an afterthought. It's just one of these secular preschools with the Bible stories thrown in. And it's not all their fault either. Again, if you're dependent on donations and the goodwill of the congregation and the church board, they don't really have the freedom to reach out to the kids to teach them as they should. But preschool is just not glamorous. It's not revered, respected the way the older grades are. I want to stress this next point. The biggest difference between Grace Community School and typical church preschool or Christian preschool is how we present the gospel. In particular, we teach the kids that the way for them to know they're in God's family, the best family, is they're getting better and better at keeping the commandments. We stress this at every Bible time. We do 2 Bible times a day, but it's also stressed throughout the day. We teach the children to look for a growing ability to keep the 10 Commandments. We teach them, how do you know you love Jesus? How do you know you're in Christ's family? This is how you know. Do you follow Christ through your actions? It's not just learning to recite the Bible stories, although they do that. In the 23rd Psalm, the Lord's Prayer, we do that as well. But they're taught to look at themselves to see if they're in Christ's family. And if they're not, to keep praying that God would change their heart. But we're not antinomian. Faith is followed by good works. And that is the most important difference, I think, between Grace Community School and other preschool type ministries. There are some out there, but they're not the same thing. Another big difference between Grace Community School and the vast majority of other schools is GCS, we're run to operate, so we do not need donations. We sell our services at competitive market price. No one's getting ripped off. We're at least as inexpensive as anybody else out there on the market. And they get a wonderful thing back when they acquire our services. We teach our kids to read. We teach them the Bible. We teach them the 10 Commandments. It's just a wonderful thing. One of the things I talk about in the book is socialism in the church, chapter 10, socialism in the church, because we have this artificial dichotomy between ministry, business. You got to be one or the other. And in particular, in Christianity, it's a lot of times it's not stated that boldly, but the overall thing is that somehow you can't be a business or run as a business and still be holy. But our revenue, our support for our ministry comes from sale of our child care services. And it's such a great product that even non-believers are willing to pay for it. Not only have, just with our revenues, they've allowed us to expand. We have 10 buildings in 8 locations. We have hundreds of employees that we provide with jobs, and that's a big boost to our local economy here. We train apprentices and pay the apprentices with thousands of students. But we have also, in the time since we've started our scholarship program, Grace Community Schools, we've given over $700,000 to children to come here as students to their families so that they could come. Most of these people would not be able to afford it otherwise. That's $700,000 going to evangelize children who probably would never hear the gospel, or at least not like we present it. It would not be possible to do this, to reach all these children with the gospel, if we didn't run this ministry with a capitalistic nature. There's so much opposition to capitalism. Like I said, a lot of times it's not stated that boldly, but people get upset. You hear a lot of times they'll gripe about corporations, about Walmart or McDonald's or whatever it is. And sometimes these are valid accusations, but I'm always questioning when I hear somebody make these kinds of complaints against McDonald's or Walmart. Are they doing it because of this infraction, supposedly, or are they envious? Because envy is a very dangerous thing. I think most of the time it's actually envy. They envy without being fully conscious of it. The mindset here is that any business, or especially a Christian business, if it's making money, if it's operating not at a loss, it's bad. Even people who are pro-Christian business, you get this feeling from them that supposedly profit corrupts, and the more profit, the more corrupt the business is. But what Jesus condemned, he condemned the love of money, meaning unproductive wealth, unproductive money, not wealth itself. We are against unproductive wealth, but a Christian's wealth is to be used to build God's kingdom. Again, I don't think the question should be, does God give his faithful children material blessings, especially monetary blessings? It should be, what should the Christian do with the monetary blessings that God gives him? If you're faithful, I believe that God will tend to give you monetary blessings, but what are you going to do with that? So the faithful Christian, they're going to take their profit that they're getting, and they're going to use it to expand their business. They're going to use it to take care of their families. They're going to use it to do works of charity. But if it is a business that is doing good, the most godly thing that the Christian businessman can do would be to expand that business. And particularly for Grace Community School, the more that we're able to expand our business, that means the more children that we're able to reach with the gospel, the more children that we are able to teach the Ten Commandments to. Christians aren't called to make money and then hide it in their mattresses. They're to use it to take dominion. One of the things I talk about in my book is the parable of the talent. It's one of my favorite parables. It speaks a great deal to me. Christ gives us this monetary wealth so that we can build his kingdom. I know we're supposed to be more productive. We measure productivity here at Grace Community School is how many kids can we reach with the gospel message? How many kids can we teach the Ten Commandments? And to look for that growing ability to keep their commandments in their lives. God wants us to take dominion. He wants us to expand his kingdom. I think one of the reasons Christians don't see as much financial blessings as they would like is because if God give it to them, they're not going to use it well. They're not going to build God's kingdom with it. They're going to waste it. They're going to be that one servant that buried the talent. They're not going to use it. They're going to just bury it. They're not going to expand God's kingdom. Back to, I mentioned McDonald's. Of course, McDonald's is a secular corporation. However, if you look at McDonald's efforts to aid against world hunger, as a business, it's done a tremendous amount. I mean, they serve a whole lot of food for very inexpensive prices. And they've done this through being a business. They provide jobs to hundreds of thousands of people. And they do works of charity, of course, but mostly they've expanded their business so that they can do the most good. And this is what Christians are supposed to do with our monetary blessings. We're supposed to expand our works to take additional dominion for Christ. And of course, in the case of Grace Community Schools, it directly means reaching more kids with the gospel. We need to get rid of this envy that we have. It cripples us, and a lot of times we don't even realize that we are making decisions and saying things because we are envious. And we need to get rid of that. Our goal is to get the full, undiluted gospel to as many people as possible. That's why Christians need to be out there making money, not for themselves, but to build God's kingdom, to win more souls. That's what we're doing here. And of course, also another big message in my book is the apprenticeship program, which we've talked about, and the apprenticeship as an alternative to traditional college. From what I've seen, it's far superior to traditional college in many, many aspects, especially the Grace Community School apprenticeship. You're getting paid to undertake the apprenticeship. You're getting housing. You're getting tuition to enroll at the Patriot Bible University. They're distance learning. It's not for everybody, but if you have the dedication, there's no better way. It really blows traditional college out of the water. And I would hope that my book is going to give people a different perspective on maybe some things they had thought that they were sure about, and maybe they're going to, maybe it'll help some people discover their callings or at least think differently about things.
You've covered a lot of ground there. Thank you very much. Just to take you up on a few things, I'm pretty concerned with health, especially in Korea, since there's practically no sick days. So you have a tremendous incentive not to get sick. But in the course of looking for ways of being healthy, I've come across a number of people that speak on health. They tend to mock the traditional medical model, and often when you come to them with a disease, I don't have any diseases, thank God, they will say, I'm sorry, you're just not sick enough already. You're going to have to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years until you become worse, and then we can operate on you. And this makes me think of the Christian's approach to evangelism. We wait until the sin is fully developed and is self-conscious, and the rebellion is self-conscious, and then we come in with evangelism for teens and adults.
I agree with you completely there. I mean, obviously you have to have both. You can't ignore people who are that far gone. And I look at people, especially the people who do ministries on the secular college campuses, and they talk to the students there, or the people outside abortion clinics. And obviously, these ministries are needed. However, as you said, this is a last-ditch effort at this point. You have to, as you said, it's much easier and much more productive. You get a lot more for your effort if you start when they're young. I think this is why Jesus tells us to be as little children. Children will accept the gospel much more willingly than adults. They're not hardened yet. They will listen to you. But even the ones who are not going to be saved or appear to be saved, I still think that you can make some kind of an impact on their lives if you get to them younger. They might not necessarily grow up to be Bible-believing Christians, but maybe there will be some influence that we had on them as a young children. They'll have some sense of the Ten Commandments in particular that will restrain them. They will not go as far down the road to depravity that they could have if they had not been there. And I think that's very important. The most fruitful field is going to be those younger children. You've got to get them when they're young. The enemies of Christianity, they understand this. They're trying to ever get the children younger and younger. We have here in America now, we have the push for universal pre-K. Government doesn't want just kindergarten and elementary on up now. They want them before they get to official school. They want them there. If you want to be a preschool teacher here where I am, you have to take all these government classes where you are indoctrinated into humanism. It doesn't matter if you're going to be teaching in a Christian preschool or not, you must take these classes. It's very clear that they understand they have to get these children young. They want them as young as possible. And Christians, we need to take the same strategy. We need to get them when they are young as well.
You've used the word enemy there. I'm sure you wonder often, why don't more people come here and beat down the doors and say, I want to start right now? I'm sure you wonder that. And as we're talking, a number of enemies to that happening. Now, obviously, not everybody will be called, and a call is important, but all things being equal, you would probably expect a little bit more of a positive response. But some enemies to your approach: envy, the idea that nobody should have the right to do better. So any message which says you can do substantially better than others is a turn-off, as it were. And Gary North uses the term poverts. I think he borrowed that from somebody else. They have a perverse attitude which says poverty is to be preferred to financial independence. And just to expand upon that, you've hinted at this, and I'm sure you had this verse in the back of your mind. Another hindrance just related to envy, related to this perversion, is Deuteronomy 8:18. He is the one that gives you the power to get wealth that you might establish the covenant. So if you are not covenantally minded, if you're just ignorant of what the Bible says about the covenant with God, which by nature involves blessings and involves not just you, but your generation and the generation to come, then you're not going to have the right mindset. And as you say, God is not going to give talents, invest in, as it were, people that are professional talent barriers.
Yes, and also because Grace Community Schools is set up to be run by families. And one of the things I talk about with your callings is you need to find a calling. And I believe God gives us callings that allow us to take care of our families. I call the book Full Reward. I would hope people that God would use it to help people discover their callings and earn their full reward. And part of that full reward is being able to take care of your family. You have to take care of your family first and foremost. If you're doing something that is not allowing you to take care of your family, I think you need to reevaluate it, because it might not be your calling. I don't think God wants his people to be beggars. There's a lot of metrics, a lot of ways to measure success, but you have to look at, we don't want to, because of this envy thing and because of this socialist nature of our society, but you have to look at money as one of those metrics. God's blessings aren't just spiritual, they are also material. You need those material blessings, the monetary blessings, to be able to take dominion. Again, about the talent, you have to have those talents to be able to invest them, to be able to take dominion. Dominion requires capital. We get part of our reward here and now because we're supposed to be using it to further God's kingdom. Reverend McIntyre, in his book, he says freedom is the ability to own and control private property. And of course, when we say, the Christian, of course, believes that private property is God's property. So he wants Christians in charge of property, building God's kingdom, taking that money, taking that property, taking those people and using it to further God's kingdom. To earn a full reward, you need to be free. You need to be free from fear of taking care of your family. You need to be free to be able to do what God has called you to do, even if others are in opposition to you. You need to have dominion over yourself. You need to be able to take care of your family. You have to take care of all of your family needs, your spiritual needs, your educational and material needs. I think that that would be definitely a core message of the book, is that you need a calling. You need to find out what God has called you in this life to do. How are you going to earn your reward? How are you going to take care of your family? What work does God have for you? He puts us here on earth to work. And a lot of people, they just float from job to job. They do this job, then they switch to this job, they switch to this field, but they never seem to discover their calling, or they rebel against their calling. But we need to find our callings, to find our purpose beyond the day-to-day existence. And of course, if your calling happens to be in the field of Christian education, well, then I think there's some other things in the book that can help you out there.
And just one final enemy, as it were, of perhaps embracing your approach is just what you've been talking about, taking dominion, theonomy, the law of God. The law of God is, you must not shy away from that. I found myself at one stage in my life knowing that theonomy was correct, but afraid to say anything about it. And in part, it was due to my being beholden to others at that stage. As I was talking to Jeremy in this second interview, who mentioned St. Paul, and St. Paul was bold because he wasn't beholden. Now, all things being equal, that was one of the reasons he wasn't beholden to his congregations for his message. But theonomy is at the center of what you do, and it's applied in many ways, but in the presentation of the gospel, in that you're saying that you need, and this is not some radical cultic approach, this is just plain old Christianity. Conversion requires a sanctification in terms of the law of God, and that for many is a big turn-off. And perhaps that makes many fearful of what other people will say. And that's part of counting the cost, I suppose, of entering in and embracing such a ministry. Many people, maybe your own parents, maybe your siblings, will not appreciate this very much at all, potentially. And what I want to ask, how big do you think this can be, this grace community approach?
It's something that can be used worldwide, and it already is. We have a missionary in Japan who's been adapting our ideas. I think Jeremy mentioned him. Also in Mexico now. He was running elementary school based on very Orthodox Christian school based on the works of Rushduni. Because of our influence, he's now expanding it to the preschool arena where he is. The idea is the Grace Community model, the Grace Community system. I don't see any reason why it can't be used more or less anywhere in the world. Of course, you're going to have to adapt it depending on where you are in the world, but the model that we're going to teach preschoolers, we're going to provide such quality care, such a great product that many of the people are not interested in Christianity at all, but they're going to come for other reasons. They're going to come because it's economical. They're going to come because the quality of the care is so high, because the children are learning to read, they're learning music. They're going to come for all these other reasons. And then they're going to see the commandment teaching, they're going to see the gospel presentation, and they're going to more or less be happy with that as well, even if that wasn't originally why they came. They're going to be happy with the program overall, that they're going to, even if they themselves are not Christians, they have no interest in church or Christianity, they're going to pay to put their children here, and we are going to get to witness to them, to evangelize them.
So it's already gone into Mexico and being applied there. It's up and running in Japan. So those are two very different cultures from the United States. They're different languages, different administrations, different legal systems. They're not historically very friendly to Christianity. Mexico has had the world's first communist revolution, and Japan at various stages has outlawed Christianity. So it's remarkable to consider those facts, that what might be considered unfruitful soil, well, these things are working, and perhaps you're in another country, you speak another language, but your ears are pricked up. And I would encourage you to go and get Aaron's book. It's available in hard copy. It's available in Amazon in the Kindle store, certainly Kindle UK, but also probably all the other Amazon stores. And read it. Read Ellsworth McIntyre's book. Get in touch with these guys. Phone the number on the video, and get on your knees and pray and ask all the counsel that you can of godly folks. But what message would you like to leave with our listeners?
You can go to our website, www.gcsapprenticeship.com. There's more information about my book, about Reverend McIntyre's book. You can also find out about some of our other projects that Reverend Jeremy Walker has been heavily involved in, our operations manual, the curriculum that we've got in progress. There's some articles on there that you can read, contact information for us. It's a really good place to start. You can, as you said, get the books from the various ebook stores or order a hard copy of it from that gcsapprenticeship.com. And again, I think that I would like the listeners to think for themselves how they can earn the fullest reward possible. And if you're in Christian education, that's going to be paying attention to the youngest members of our society. That's the method our enemies of Christianity are using. We need to be doing that as well. There needs to be commensurate effort on the part of Christians to get to these younger children. Reformation is going to come, but it's going to come from the bottom up. It's going to come with independent Christian families, independent Christian schools, teaching the kids, these young kids, and fighting against this spiritual child abandonment, which I would equate, as I do in the book, with even a child sacrifice. If you're giving your child up to be educated by humanists, by these godless people, the spiritual child sacrifice. As Jeremy Walker said, a lot of these kids they're orphans, at least many of them spiritual orphans. And Christians, we need to step in. We need to rescue these kids, just like the early church. They rescued the abandoned babies that the Roman families had abandoned. We need to step in and take care of these children. What could be better for these kids from these broken homes to come in and see a Christian family running a Christian school? Most of the time, in a very real sense, we are surrogate families for these kids. We are maybe the only real Christian family that they are going to see. And my family, your family, if you're following our system, you're doing evangelism, you're running the school, you're doing all these things, this self-supporting missionary work, just like with Paul with the tent making. You're not dependent on donations, you're not dependent on the goodwill of the church, you are free to do what God has called you to do. And the Grace Community School system is just a tremendously powerful system, tremendously powerful way to make that happen. We really need a rebuilding effort in our society, and I'm convinced that there's no better tool to aid in this rebuilding than what we've got going here. And also, young Christian men and women, if you're interested in Christian education, consider becoming apprentices with us. If you want to make a difference, if this is your calling, we may have a place for you. And maybe you'll be like me. Maybe you'll find your other half, the person that God has called you to marry in this calling. I think joint callings is very important. It's not always possible, but when a husband and a wife have the same calling, they are working together in the same calling, is just an amazing thing. Again, if you are called to Christian education, we might have a spot for you here.
Thank you very much for those closing thoughts. Thanks again for agreeing to be interviewed. That was very helpful, and I trust that you'll get some useful feedback and interaction for that, and we look forward to perhaps talking again sometime in the future. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it edifying. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and YouTube. Remember to think God's thoughts after Him by the power of the Holy Spirit. Until next time, every blessing in the Lord.